Yes. Oh.
Welcome. I'm Lonnie Skrentner, President of the Edina League of Women Voters. This is the candidate forum for Minnesota State Senate District 49. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit volunteer organization that encourages informed voting and citizen participation in government. Our co-sponsors tonight are Jewish Community Action and the National Council of Jewish Women Minneapolis chapter. The League of Women Voters does studies and takes stands on issues. We do not endorse or support any political party or any political candidate. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. And the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the League of any candidate. Forums are videotaped and rebroadcast on local channel 16. There is a schedule on most of the seats in the room. It will also be posted on the Edina City website and the League of Women Voters of Edina website. So please tell your friends and neighbors and relatives who are not here this evening that they can still participate in this forum by watching. There are more forums coming up, and those will be posted on the League of Women Voters of Edina website with Facebook reminders sent out. So if you are a Facebook member, please like the Edina League of Women Voters page, and you will receive those reminders. On September 13th, there is a co-sponsored forum at 7 p.m. for County Commissioner at the Minnetonka City Hall. On September 19th, we will run two forums for the State House districts, 49A at 7 o'clock and 49B at 8 o'clock. On September 21st, we will have a candidate forum for Edina City Council. Our moderator this evening is Jerry Nelson from the League of Women Voters of the Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids area. Jerry, take it away.
Thank you, Lonnie. Before we get started, I'd like you to all take out your cell phones and make sure that they don't interrupt our forum tonight. Turn them off. Thank you so much. Here's how the forum will run tonight. The speaking order was assigned before the forum and will rotate with each question. We'll start with 1-minute opening statements, followed by a question that the candidates received beforehand. They'll get 2 minutes to answer that. And then we will have audience questions. And the candidates will have 1 minute to answer each of the audience questions. We'll close the evening out with closing statements of 1.5 minutes. We have 2 timers here who will be keeping track of the time for the candidates, and they'll hold up cards to show when it's time to stop. Audience questions can be written throughout the forum and given to an usher with the league button on. And my 2 question sorters over here will hand them to me so that I can ask as many as we can possibly get in on as many topics as we can cover. All the questions become property of the League of Women Voters Edina. The forum is being video recorded, so please hold your applause until the end of the forum. Thank you so much for attending this evening. This forum is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters Edina, the Jewish Community Action, and the Minneapolis chapter of the National Council of Jewish Women. The purpose of this evening's forum is to provide an opportunity to hear candidates from the Minnesota Senate District 49 discuss issues that are important to you. We'll try to cover as many issues as possible in the time we have. If your questions are not addressed tonight, feel free to ask the candidates directly. All candidates who filed for District 49 and who will be on the November 8th ballot were invited to attend this forum. The candidates are Melissa Franson and Mike Lehman. Let's start with our opening statements. And we'll start with Melissa Franson.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you and good evening. Thank you for being here and taking time to be part of this discussion. As our moderator said, I'm Melissa Franson. I've represented District 49 for the last 4 years. It's been an honor and privilege to be serving the communities of Edina, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka. I've served on 3 committees, and one of them is Transportation Public Safety. The other is Education, Higher Education, and Workforce Development. Prior to that, I was also in the E12 Policy Committee, and I'm Vice Chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. I really want to thank the League and all the sponsors for putting this forum together. I pride myself with being accessible and really focusing on constituent services. So just this morning, I was with constituents over at Jerry's just to talk about issues that are important to you, like I do all the time. And I just want to continue to be your voice at the Capitol. I appreciate this discussion, and I hope that we're able to answer as many questions as possible for all of you to have an informed decision come November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Lehman, please. Opening statement.
Thank you. And thanks to the Edina League of Women Voters for putting this on tonight, and a special thanks to Jerry Nelson coming all the way from Champlin to be the moderator tonight. Just so you can get to know me a little bit, I've grown up in the Twin Cities area. I actually was raised in Edina here up on Highway 100 by Normandale Lutheran Church. I have been a member of the Bloomington City now for 36 years. My background includes a lot of political activity through the Twin West Chamber of Commerce, and I've been privileged to raise 2 sons in Bloomington. Both are grown sons, and I have 1 grandson who is now attending Bloomington schools. I went to the University of Minnesota, where I graduated a while ago. And recently retired, my wife and I, in January, after myself being 24 years at a large wholesaler. Prior to that, I was privileged to be part of the startup of 5 different companies, so I'm very business-oriented. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our prepared question is, what changes would you make in state campaign finance laws? For example, before each election, voters receive communications such as leaflets, postcards, and ads naming a specific candidate. Would you support requiring groups to disclose how much they spend and who donated the money for these communications? And we'll start with Mike Lehman.
Thank you. Minnesota has a great history of campaign finance, and we lead the nation in some of our requirements. Both Melissa and I currently have limits on how much we can have contributed to our funds, $1,000 per individual this year, and we're also under certain restrictions for our own contributions, as well as PACs and unions and others that contribute to our campaigns. Our spending limits are roughly $104,000 this year, and I believe Melissa's is around $95,000. I think those are good limits. So what would I do to change campaign laws? We both agreed to the campaign limits because we are accepting public subsidy, and in order to qualify for that, you have to raise certain campaign limits and hold to your spending limits. However, on one of the public subsidies, the way that's funded comes from the checkoff on your tax returns, and it's currently been $5 checkoff since 1987, almost 30 years now. So one of the campaign changes I might, request would be to raise that checkoff, because that's invaluable funds to the candidates when they're running. In regards to the limits we are under, I think those are more than adequate. Roughly $100,000 to run a Senate campaign to me is plenty and should be held at that, if not even reduced. And the main question that was asked is, when these outside interest groups, which are outside of our campaign restrictions, put out ads or literature on our behalf, which again we have no control over, should they be disclosed for who's putting it out and the monies spent? And because I can see about the only reason for disclosing that information would be to use that against the other candidate, I am not in favor of disclosing that at this time. I think that levels the playing field by keeping the rules and regulations as they are today.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. In 2012, our campaign and our election cycle, we were the most expensive race in the entire legislative races around the state, and that was not something to be proud about. It was a lot of outside money that dilutes your own message. I think candidates should be out there door knocking and talking to people and actually having their own voice. And we do have limits, as Mr. Lehman has pointed out. They were just raised this last biennium, or we just raised them. In my campaign in 2012, we probably raised around just over $100,000, but the campaign as a whole, between all of it, it was over $1 million. And I think that's a lot of money for a legislative race, and if you see across the country, they're only getting more expensive, and quite frankly, it excludes a lot of people's voices in elections and democracy. I think people should be able to have their message out. There's a lot of social media and more mediums out there to be able to do that. But when we don't have disclosure where those negative ads come from, it really changes the discourse and campaign, and not in a positive way. So I have supported in the past disclosure, and I will support that in the future of requiring the disclosures of corporate and union independent expenditures. Again, as being a recipient of a lot of negative advertisement last cycle, I certainly think they have a lot more voice because they have a lot more money than what we're able to, or limits that we have by law. So if that's going to be how Mr. Lehman mentioned, leveling the playing field, we should be able to know who is funding what and where that message is coming from, again, because it dilutes from the message of the candidate, and that's, I think, what people really want to hear from, not people or outside voices trying to influence local politics. So again, I will support and have in the past disclosure of independent expenditures.
Thank you. Okay, the first audience question, which we'll have 1 minute to answer each of these now. Which one issue do you think is most important to work on with legislators across the aisle? And Melissa Franson, would you start, please?
Well, thank you. There's many issues that I would want to work across the aisle. Actually, I work very closely with my colleagues across the aisle in all my committees, particularly in healthcare. So if you give me the opening, I will take the minute or two to talk about prior authorization. It's an issue and it deals with medication access and affordability of healthcare, which we all talk about it, and it sounds great to have healthcare be more affordable. And in this case, prior authorization for medication is a process by which you are able to get your access to your medications through your doctor. And there's a bill that I've put forward, and thinking it's not a partisan issue, went all the way through the Senate, and the House did not give it a hearing, even though I have a House author who's a Republican. So that's an issue in my life that I feel very passionate about, trying to do something about the rising costs of medication. You've heard about the EpiPen issue recently in the news. We just have to do something about access to medication and the affordability, and I hope we can be able to do it in a nonpartisan way.
Thank you. Mike Lehman, what would you work across the aisle on?
Well, I think it's the most controversial thing that's been facing us, and it's been in the news almost every day, and this is the Southwest Light Rail. I do believe in a multimodal type transportation, but at the same token, we look at the cost concerns on this, and as we reach across the aisle, we do have to come up with a reasonable compromise. The way our transportation system exists today, it's not sustainable with just focusing on bridges and roads. We have to come up for the future of our state and attracting more business to this state, a good multimodal type transportation system. I think we have to look at the light rail as well as bus rapid transit systems. When I look at the light rail and see $125 million per mile versus $5 to $10 million per mile to build roads and bridges and have those serviced by buses, I certainly think we have to weigh that economics of that very carefully and work across the aisle to come up with an excellent compromise.
Thank you. You really jumped the gun on the next question here.
Okay.
The question in two parts. What is your position on state funding for Southwest Light Rail Transit, and what is your vision for rail transit in the Twin Cities longer term? So you don't have to take a whole minute, because you've kind of told us some of that already.
Okay. The state funding is the first issue. The state had promised many, many years ago to fund their $135 million portion of this, and for some reason, the last 4 to 8 years, it has been rescinded. The interesting thing this session in the bonding bill, Governor Dayton, who is in favor of the light rail, came out with about a $1.5 billion bonding request, but did not fund light rail. The Senate, controlled by the DFL, came out with a 1.8 bonding bill initially, did not include light rail. Then at the last minute, when session got gridlocked, it was because the DFL requested the $135 million be put back into the bonding bill. A little confusing to me when they didn't have it there initially. So it is important to fund it, but I think we have to come up with a more cost-effective way of looking at that whole situation. So the vision for the future, I've already mentioned, a multimodal type transportation system should be worked out.
Melissa Franson.
Thank you. I have always been a supporter of Southwest Light Rail, even when I ran in 2012. And for me, it's an economic development issue for the Twin Cities, the Metro, but also for the entire state. I also authored a bonding bill the first year I served in the legislature to fund the state portion. We've offered many different compromises and ideas to fund the state portion. We have different, facts in terms of how it ended up in this last legislative session, but it's been more than a decade that the state has been trying to fund this portion, and right now we're looking at a hybrid approach of state funding, county funding. At the end of the day, it's taxpayer monies that are coming to invest in infrastructure for the roads and bridges and transit of the future. So my vision is that we not only focus on Southwest, but the next line and possibly the future lines that will go to perhaps to Rochester, perhaps Duluth. This is something that we need to explore and have a vision for the future, and I support roads and bridges as well as serving in the Transportation Committee. So multimodal is also something that I support as well.
Thank you. Next question. The vacancy rate for affordable housing in the metro area has dropped to 2% or below. What legislation would you support to preserve and increase affordable housing? Melissa Franson, start, please.
Thank you for the question. I actually have worked on this issue, and it is becoming more unaffordable to live in the metro area, particularly in our district. And I worked with our tax committee in the legislature to pass some fixes particularly for the city of Edina, where we know we are trying to increase the goals for the city of affordable housing. And we made those changes. They passed through in the Senate and the House and were signed into law. So I've actually worked on the issue. It has to be something that we partner with our state. And also, I've also been active with affordable housing for homeless youth in our district as well with 66 West. Again, I've worked on that issue, testified in support of it, and we are now moving forward with that project, which it's moving in progress and making more affordability of housing, not just in our district, but across the state. I've also supported the Homes for All bill that also puts money for the entire state, not just our district. So I'm proud of those accomplishments.
Thank you. Okay, Mike Freeman.
Affordable housing is important to the community and all communities, and I definitely support that as it exists today, and should be increased to some extent to make sure everyone who wishes housing to have it. And I'll even take it a step further than affordable housing. I think we need to, especially for first-time home buyers, put in a little bit more incentive for that. And one way that would be to reduce possibly the property tax or grandfather that in over roughly a 5-year period, starting with no property tax for the first year, just as a way to get people make home ownership more affordable. And the second one is kind of a fun one. I did this in another recording where I said, across the nation we have this tiny house movement. What if we were to encourage somewhere in Edina or Bloomington to come up with a tiny home development where it not only provides housing but makes it very affordable for quite a number of more people?
Thank you. Next question. Do you support or oppose legislation to restore voting rights to individuals convicted of a felony who are on parole or probation? Why or why not? Mike Lehman.
Now, that's a good question I haven't had asked before, so thank you, whoever submitted that question. I think we all know during our life we're accountable for certain actions, so when these people are convicted and therefore they serve their time and then come out on parole or whatever, as long as they're still under parole, I don't believe maybe they should have that voting right, because that is something I hope that helps deter, keep them from committing the crime. However, once they've served that sentence and parole is up, I don't think it should be a life sentence in regards to taking the right to vote away. That's an American right, and I would like to see that restored.
Melissa Franson.
I have supported restoring rights of felons. Once you've completed your sentence and you're back in the world and you're paying, a taxpayer, you should be part of a society, and voting is part of that decision-making process in democracy. So once you've served your time, I believe, and I'm an attorney, so the devil's in the detail of the bill that comes forward, but I have supported a bill that would do just that. And I just think it's fairness of if we are going to be participating in this country and in our democracy, that it's a fundamental right, but certainly it can be taken away, and it can also be restored with limitations. So I believe the efforts that we've supported in the past in the legislature would accomplish that, and hopefully someday we're able to be successful with that.
Thank you. What is your position on reducing Minnesota taxes on Social Security income? Melissa Franson, you're first.
Thank you. And that I really appreciate that question. It's a more complex issue that we can probably elaborate in a minute response. But fundamentally, not all Social Security tax Social Security income is taxed. It's above a certain threshold. Certainly, I've heard from a lot of constituents that this is an issue that people are moving away from Minnesota because there's other states that are making those changes, and Minnesota's lagging behind. So I'm open to it. The reality is it's a big tax item on the government budget, so we do have to find a way to prioritize it. We did pass a bill where we eliminated the taxes on veterans' pensions, so that was just passed, and I had a bill on that issue. So we are making progress there. It's just a matter of aligning in and prioritizing it for a state. So I'm open to it, but it's a little bit more complicated than a minute answer. So thank you for the question, and I can certainly follow up with whoever asked it.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
When Social Security was first put in many years ago by the federal government, it was meant to be untaxed. And over the years, the federal government has taxed it, and now a few states are taxing it, Minnesota being one of them. I mentioned earlier that I'm recently retired, so how do you think I feel about taxing Social Security benefits? I am blessed that I don't have to start collecting possibly till age 70. However, at the same token, I believe those taxes, those earnings, Social Security earnings, should not be taxed. And we need to come up with a creative way to implement that to, again, encourage our aging and senior population to remain in this state and not be enticed by other states that do not have a tax imposed.
Thank you. Melissa Franson?
I just answered it.
Oh, I didn't cross you off. Okay, so next question. The Comprehensive Health Equity and Employee Rights Act, or CHEER Act, has been proposed in Minnesota. The CHEER Act would ensure that health plans offering drug coverage would have to cover contraceptives too. There is an exemption for religious institutions. If elected, would you support the CHEER Act? Why or why not? We'll start with Mike Franson. Melissa Franson.
Mike Franson.
Too bad you're both M's.
Thank you. Well, I.
No, wait. You had just answered that one, hadn't you? So it should be Mike Lehman.
It doesn't
yeah,
matter.
It doesn't matter, but go ahead.
Either way.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to go ahead then?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, very good. This gets into a lot of different areas, and we could go, several different ways with it. I believe the First Amendment rights about religious beliefs and stuff should be upheld, and that should not enter into society in terms of a lot of legislation that's been pending lately. In regards to the CHEER and contraceptives, I know there are certain religious groups that firmly believe that is not right. And I want those groups to continue to be represented and have their right to not go with the contraceptives if that's so their choice. At the same token, in terms of the medical plans and that initiative, I personally do not see strong opposition to it, and so I think that would be fine the way it's written or proposed.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
Well, I haven't read the CHEER Act, but certainly I can say for what from the question, I can say I would support something that would allow for protections of our constitutional rights of religion, and if that's taken care of, I certainly support access to health care. And being on the Health and Human Services Committee, I see a lot of unmet needs in our society, in our state, and certainly we have to be able to not only have access to health care, but contraception is part of that, and it's also a women's issue, and it's about the health and well-being of all of our families, and to have the information at our hands to make informed decisions about when to expand a family. And it certainly is something I would support, but again, with the notion of safeguarding our constitutional rights of religion.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, the state of Minnesota has a large achievement gap among different student groups. What do you think the legislature should do to close this gap? Melissa Franson.
The achievement gap is something that we've been talking a lot about for many years, and Minnesota unfortunately has we're improving, but we have the unfortunate comparison of having the best achievement for Caucasian children, but not for the children of color in our state. And what can we do to improve it? It's not just on the education side. I think our teachers are doing great, and we need to support our teachers and continue to provide the resources they need to teach our kids that are ever more diverse. But we also have to think about the holistic approach of health and human services, transportation, housing, all these other areas that help bring a family, have a healthy community and healthy families. So what can we do? We can pull a lot of different levers, and right now I have been focusing on the early childhood education work, particularly scholarships for targeted families who need it the most. We have limited resources in our state, and certainly I support and voted for all-day preschool, for all-day kindergarten, and I support the notion of all-day preschool, but in the interim, while we have limited resources, I support a targeted approach.
Thank you. Mike Lehman, please.
The interesting part of this question, we often hear from proposals that, well, let's just spend a little more money on it, then we can give more teachers and attention to this achievement gap. However, I think if you look at where the highest per pupil spending is in the inner cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, as opposed to out in the suburbs, as well as where is the largest achievement gap, it is in the inner cities. The money itself is not the solution. I think the solution is allowing the teachers and parents to be more strongly involved, coming up with what they probably know are ways to eliminate or mitigate the achievement gap, looking to other states for what they're doing, because some states are having great success. And then we have had success at several of the charter schools that have been around. They've made tremendous strides in the achievement gap, and that's through a variety of ways that I don't have time to go into. So there are solutions, they're proven, they're out there. We need to exploit those and expand those.
Thank you. Let's stay with education here, and Melissa referred to this a little bit, but Mike will start. Should the state and/or school districts fund pre-kindergarten for all children in Minnesota? Why or why not?
Okay. I have been talking to some of the school superintendents about this very issue. That would require tremendous capital and infrastructure to add classrooms and/or teachers to fund or to staff pre-K. Pre-K is very important. To have them kindergarten ready is critical to the success of an ongoing education process all the way through high school and beyond. At the same token, it's almost, to me, a solution looking for a problem. Most of us are blessed in the suburbs and stuff to not need the pre-K. So to fund it and across the state, it to me is not necessary. What is important is to continue the scholarships and funding for those truly needing pre-K, and that again is often the inner city, the poorer families, and so forth. So I strongly support scholarships for those who are in need of it.
Thank you. Melissa Franson, please.
Thank you. Well, I don't fundamentally disagree with funding preschool for all, but serving on those committees and seeing the need and seeing that most of the development of a child's brain happens before they're 4-year-old. At 4 years, it's almost too late, and I've heard this from experts. There's data that surrounds this. I've heard it from early childhood teachers who also support that early intervention is key. So what are we doing earlier upstream is where I like to focus on, and that's why I support scholarships, but we also have a huge waiting list for childcare, and affordability of childcare in Minnesota is non-existent, frankly, for families, working families and the working poor. So I would say a hybrid approach to dealing with childcare affordability, but also that is where the first interaction with a structure for kids are. So I would certainly, in an ideal world where we have unlimited resources, that would be certainly a solution, an easy one, because we know what it would look like and where to offer it. But today, I would support really focusing earlier upstream, 0 to 3, and continue to make that progress with scholarships.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is, what can the legislature do to reduce or eliminate the high MATEFRA parental fee for parents of autistic students? I hope you know what that means. Can you explain? Melissa, do you know what that is?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
What can the legislature do to reduce or eliminate the high MA-TEFRA parental fee for parents of autistic students?
Thank you. Well, I'm a little familiar with TEFRA, and it becomes really unaffordable for parents with autistic kids to be able to afford the therapies that they need. And then it's if you make a certain income, you're also expected to spend more on those therapies. And the government our state government does a poor job to support those families with those needs. We have been doing more with autistic children. We're trying to include them as health plans to include their services, because we have more and more children who are diagnosed with a spectrum of autism, and it affects more people than you think, and it's really unaffordable, and we need to get the intervention. So again, upstream, so we're able to help kids earlier and be able to provide the services they need earlier, so at the end of the day, they're more productive throughout society as they grow older. So we have a lot to do with not just the funding, but also how we are able to support kids with any sort of disability or any diagnosis. So I certainly support that issue.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
I'll have to be honest, I am not familiar with this. At the same token, I know the state of Minnesota has made great strides in treating autism, recognizing autism, and moving ahead to treat these children more effectively and mainstream them whenever possible. So in that regard, I am in favor of reducing any burden on a parent that has an autistic child, and to see what we can do to improve their situation in as many cases as possible.
Thank you. If there is no special session and therefore no bonding bill, public funding for 66 West may be at risk. What is your position on funding for youth experiencing homelessness? Mike Freeman, will you start, please?
Yeah, Lehman. I'm a little confused. Wait a minute. The bonding bill, Route 66, but then you went to youth or something?
Okay, 66 West is a homeless shelter that's being built in Edina.
See,
yeah.
I'm not familiar with that.
And
okay.
and there's some funding for that in the bonding bill, but we don't have a bonding bill yet.
Okay, and this has to do with youth homelessness?
Yes.
The bonding bill issue, of course, I could go into that and why that doesn't solve the problem with the question is addressing. We have to possibly come up with, at the local level, even the city level, to keep some of these things going, or looking to charities or church organizations if we need to in the interim. It's very difficult if the funding isn't there to suddenly come up with funding and say the special session should have provided it, it didn't, what do we do next? absent the legislative action, it's very difficult to do this. So I think we would look for creative solutions within the community to help address this, because it is a serious issue.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that the 66 West is a homeless housing, not a shelter, and they would provide apartments for homeless youth and link them to jobs around our state, so as well in the metro area here in Edina in particular, and I've supported that project. I've actually supported language to fix some technical errors that were made, and that was actually in the tax bill, which unfortunately, since we have no special session, we were not able to come back and pass it. It had a $100 million mistake, and that was why the governor vetoed it. Unfortunately, it did have a piece of that was one of my bills working on 66 West. My understanding is that the project will not be jeopardized to date, and I've been in communication with the city about that. It's a project that I've supported since its inception, and will continue to do so despite not having a special session, despite not having a bonding or a tax bill, which again, the tax bill was vetoed because it was a technical error.
Okay. What do you think of unionization of personal care attendants, Melissa Franson?
Well, this issue came up in my first year when I was serving freshman term and freshman year, and I do support if people want to unionize, that is their right under our federal laws, under our state laws. I do more sympathize with the PCAs. PCAs are personal care attendants who take care of our most vulnerable Minnesotans, the elderly, the disabled, people who need care, and they actually lots of times make less money than people serving you in a restaurant. These people are taking care of people, of your family members, so I certainly have sympathy and will work hard to make sure that they have the support they need from the state, but they do have a right to unionize if they so choose, and the only vote that we've had along those issues has been a bill that had the unionization of PCAs in addition to child care providers, and I did not vote for that bill. I didn't think those two should have been linked.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
The right to unionize, I agree with Melissa, is there and can be carried out if the people involved with it so choose. In this case, the personal care attendants did vote to unionize and are now under that. I think, however, we have to be real careful when these things occur as to what are the long-range implications of them. I know one of the things with personal care attendants was the overtime regulation, one of the reasons they wanted to unionize so that they would get their fair share. Over 40 hours a week. They would have time and a half paid like many other jobs. The downside of that, however, has been instead of now earning 50 or 60 hours of pay, which is critical for the personal care attendants, many of the funding was not provided, or most of the funding was not provided for the overtime provision. Therefore, these agencies have cut back the personal care attendants' time to 40 hours a week, and so their pay has actually been cut. And many of those people are now looking for other jobs when the people who need their services the most are left jeopardized.
Thank you. Do you support or oppose requiring criminal background checks on every gun sale? Please explain your position. Mike Lehman first, please.
Definitely. The whole Second Amendment right issue is one I support, the right to bear arms. I don't want to make any mistakes about that. At the same token, when I, who have never owned a gun, can go to a gun show and buy as many guns as I want with no questions asked, I don't think that's correct. If, at the same token, the same rules going to a gun shop where you do have to have a background check and or a waiting period apply, those are two different rules. We need to have them consistent across all platforms. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
Thank you. I do support the right to bear arms. That's, again, a fundamental right for not just Minnesotans, but Americans. But I do support some common sense precautions. Certainly background checks seems to be a very easy way forward. They do have their mistakes as well. So I would go a step further and say we need to do more about assault rifles. Why do we have to have anyone outside of our military have access to these guns that didn't exist when we first passed our right to to bear arms. We certainly need common sense in this area, and I hope that we are able to make it a common sense discussion, not a partisan discussion. And we need to keep our families and kids and everyone safe in our communities. There's a lot of other baggage like mental health that we need to deal with. So certainly, unless we fix all those issues, we're going to continue to see bad news when it comes to gun violence in our country.
Thank you. Last year, the legislature provided additional funding for small business development and first-time homebuyers, many of whom are people of color. Would you support additional funds to address racial disparities in home ownership and small business development? Melissa Franson.
Thank you. I did support the equity package, although I'm hesitant of having just one-time funding to deal with equity as a whole. There are systemic issues that deal with equity across the board in our state government and our institutions, so I'd like to see a better approach, and I do applaud the governor with trying to address this issue from an economic standpoint and from a labor standpoint. Again, I see health inequities, and in the work that I do in the legislature, we see lack of access to transportation, lack of access to good education for your kids depending on the zip code that you live in, and we need to tackle all these issues. We can't just find one area to focus on and think that we're going to fix equity. Certainly, I'd like to see something more sustainable, and I think there's been some progress there. But again, I think we need to look at the issue holistically. And for small business, I have a small business. I have had to file as a women-owned business, and all the paperwork and all the time that you spend on these programs is just taking time away from me, the ability to grow my business. So I see it from that side as well.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
Yes, I also support anything that would enhance small business development as well as home ownership for a greater variety of people. However, I think it should also be a level playing field, that everyone should have access to this equally across all spectrums. Providing better education is critical, of course, to this, but the big thing with the business portion of that is job creation. So anytime we can increase job creation through business incentives and or less taxation, that's going to translate in turn to better job opportunities, which in turn goes to home ownership. So it's all related there, and so I think we have to do whatever we can to provide not only a healthy business, which is the backbone of a successful society and a community, but we have to then encourage and make sure all races, disparities, and stuff are addressed and they have equal opportunity to these jobs.
Thank you. We have one constitutional amendment on our ballot this November 8th. It says, shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to remove lawmakers' power to set their own salaries and instead establish an independent citizens-only council to prescribe salaries of lawmakers? What is your position on this amendment and why? Mike Lehman.
If you look at the pay of legislators, it's a little out of line with society. That being said, the control now rests with the legislators to raise their own pay. I don't know how many of you in the professions you have been can raise your own pay. So in that regard, if I said, yeah, leave it in there, we want to raise our own pay, I'd be a little foolish. So I do not believe in that, because that isn't the way society works. I think we should have this independent council established if we are considering having that pay raised. At the same token, this is viewed upon as a part-time position, which is hard to believe with the amount of work that people put into it. At the same token, I hope no one's going into it for the money or career.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
Thank you. Well, at least as a small business owner, I could raise my own pay, but certainly wanted my business to be healthy. But in all seriousness, I have voted for this proposal to raise legislative pay. I'm a young professional who could be making a lot more money elsewhere. We certainly don't want this issue in this office to be something lucrative for people. I actually would go further. I would actually just have a large full-time legislature, less members, use the budget that we have today, and because we are not only passing laws for our state and we're sort of the board members of our state, and when we pass a bill, we go back to our day job, and you hope that the administration is going to pass your bill and implement it the way you like. So the times have changed. We want to recruit young and people of all backgrounds. So certainly I'm not thinking about it for myself. I'm thinking about the future person who's going to be holding this seat 5-10 years down the road, and I want it to be something that they want to do and serve and are able to afford it, and not just for those who are rich, retired, or have the means to be able to live off $31,000. It's just not, and it's not a part-time job. So certainly want to make this job more compelling for people.
Thank you. This year, California became the 5th state to authorize medical aid in dying. This allows terminally ill, mentally capable adults to ask for and receive medication from their personal physician that they may self-administer if their suffering becomes intolerable. Would you support such legislation in Minnesota? Why or why not? We'll start with Melissa Franson.
I support people's rights to really decide how they want to end their life, and certainly be open to supporting a bill like this. We do have to have more discussions about end of life. It's a real issue, and it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about what makes sense for people. It's about quality of life, and certainly people need to really think about what they want, and when you're terminally ill, if that is an option, and other states I know are either contemplating it or have passed it, I'd be open to listening to your thoughts in the district of what you think this would open things up for. But certainly it's a discussion, and it's a serious discussion that needs to happen. I'd be open to it and love to hear more from people's opinions on it.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
Yes, this is another issue that I think legislation should stay out of. I think the discussions are fine for end of life, but I think that should take place between the medical doctor and the patient themselves. The medical profession, of course, is tasked with upholding life, and I think they have to make the decision when the quality of life and or the threshold of life is no longer viable, and let that be a doctor-patient privilege. I don't think we can legislate that type of decision-making.
Thank you. Okay, for years the electorate has been up in arms about the legislature's inability to compromise and make pragmatic decisions. This applies to both parties. What can be done to improve this situation? Mike Lehman.
You're talking about being more bipartisan, reaching across the aisle, working together. I think every legislative candidate is going to be in favor of that. Fortunately, most legislation that's passed is bipartisan. It only comes down to a few issues that always get that partisan vibe on both sides of the aisle. And how do you solve that? I have to go back. I'm a little older. I believe in relationship building, and that you respect your opposition at all times and reach out to them. And so in that regard, I think that's the way we really have to solve some of this. Make sure, even in the chambers and stuff, we may respectfully disagree, but afterwards you go out and, I hate to say have a beer and a cigar, because that's probably not appropriate these days, but you go out and share a meal and discuss this and work out ways to pass legislation that's mutually beneficial for our constituents in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
Well, I think it comes up with elections and the people we elect to office, to elect people who are willing to work regardless of party line. And a lot of the issues, like Mr. Lehman was mentioning, are not partisan. I focus a lot of my efforts on health and human services. When you think, what issues really would be partisan there, we all care about the health of our state. It does come to a few issues, and some issues get more politicized than others. We still try to work and work out those kinks and get some solutions. And, Southwest is a perfect example of it. It kind of deadlocked our legislative session, for better or for worse. Here's where we are. At the end of the day, we're trying to hear from the public, and the public's clamoring that this gets done. I've been door knocking all over our district, and particularly in Bloomington, where I hear from people who are not even on the line wanting Southwest to happen and wanting us to get something through. So it's really representing the voices of our community. And I think if you go with that, you're able to make much progress. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to have a district who cares about getting things done. And that's what I try to do in a bipartisan way.
Thank you. The Minnesota Department of Corrections has indicated that there is a need for more prison beds in this state. What actions do you support to remedy this situation? Melissa Franson.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The Minnesota Department of Corrections has indicated that there is a need for more prison beds in the state. What actions do you support to remedy this situation?
Avoid having people in prison would be my goal would be to really, again, upstream, not to incarcerate people. I don't think that's the answer. It's to give them the resources to be productive citizens, and that starts with education, that starts with affordability of housing, that starts with healthcare access. So other than, that dealing with the issue upstream where it's going to cost us more, if we spend those dollars and those beds in areas where we can actually have productive citizens, I think we wouldn't have that issue of having to lock people up. So again, I would focus those efforts on where is the best return on investment for taxpayers, whether it's a particular area of education, a particular area in health and human services, or transportation. It's looking at the whole picture versus trying to just solve the problem by locking someone and throwing away the key.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
I think it's almost a sad commentary on the state of society today when our prison system is asking for more prisons. It's just saying that things aren't going well in our society. And Melissa is right on when she says we have to solve the problems and prevent them from going to prison in the first place. Prisons are getting more expensive all the time. In fact, it probably costs us more to incarcerate someone than it does to provide them with social services on the outside. So there has been reform and proposed reforms on sentencing guidelines, particularly in regards to drug offenses. And I think we have to sincerely and carefully look at those and prevent people from going for minor offenses so that the people that are locked up because of the more serious offenses, therefore hopefully mitigating the need for any future prison expansion.
Thank you. We got one more question here. We have two more questions. I'm going to combine them, and I'm going to let you choose which one you want to answer.
Oh.
How's that? What are your ideas for promoting cost-effective budgeting for the state, including evaluation of results and benefits against the attendant costs? Or what current expenditures in the state budget should be cut? You can choose. Okay, Mike Lehman, you're first.
Okay, I'm going to go with the cost-effective budgeting. It's never popular to sit down and make a list of things you want to cut because you're always going to offend someone. I come from a business background, and because of that business background, we have to financially evaluate everything we do in a business. Now, I understand that government operates a little bit differently. At the same token, I think we have to, as elected officials, make sure the cost effectiveness of all programs is best representing you as taxpayers. So therefore, auditing of all programs on a somewhat regular basis is critical. You've heard the term zero-based budgeting. I won't go into the details on that, but basically it holds accountable what's the most cost-effective. And I know the heads of our agencies are also probably aware of ways they can be more efficient within. And I think we challenge them with budget restrictions so that they come up with the solutions from within.
Thank you. Melissa Franson.
I'll try to combine both of them too. I come from background is that I worked 8 years at Target, and I started in real estate, and we had a dashboard where we looked at every project before we decided as a company whether to invest in it. And if the numbers didn't add up, then that project wasn't going to go forward, and you went with those that actually had a return on investors and so forth. We don't have a similar tool in state government, unfortunately. We can't even book savings. So if I propose something that I think it's going to save taxpayer dollars by reducing, for instance, emergency visits visits in the hospital. I can't book those savings. I can't even know if that's, what the return on investments for taxpayers or rate any of the proposals at hand. So usually what happens is the proposals pass is because they have heavy lobbying behind them. People are really clamoring for something, and it's not the way we should be making decisions in government. Certainly we want to hear from the public, but we should also be figuring out where does our taxpayer dollars reach more families and really help have a better return on investment for taxpayers. So I'd be happy to support a tool like that.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions. If you have further questions, talk to the candidates directly or visit their websites. I visited them today, and there's quite a bit of information there. Now the candidates are invited to make their 1.5-minute closing statements, and we will start with Melissa Franson.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here. And I don't know if I did a good enough job on the question of legislator pay. I certainly don't do this for the pay. I love the work that I've been doing in the last 4 years serving my community, and I will be there as long as you want me to be there to serve you and to be able to represent your voice. I think it's a very important role in our state government. We shouldn't be thinking of running for office to make money. That's not the point. The point is trying to make a difference in people's lives, and I've been trying to do that for the last 4 years. I'd like you to continue to trust me and continue the conversation in terms of what it is you need in the next 4 years. And certainly as a new mother and an expecting mother of number 2, I really do this for the next generation. I do this for my children and for their children, and hopefully we get more people engaged like you are today. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. It really is really ratifying to see that people care.
Thank you. Mike Lehman.
Yes, I want to again thank the League for putting this on this evening, and to Jerry for moderating. I am running to preserve our future. The state of Minnesota is a great state, but I think we need to preserve our future for each one of you out here tonight, for your children and your grandchildren. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that through responsible spending, through effective education, and through efficient transportation, as well as great health care. I'm also a little biased. Of course, I'm going to say seniors and go back to the Social Security issue, too. I have been proud to be not only part of this community, but part of the business community all my life. The state offers excellent clean water, clean air, all of which I want to see preserved. The way we're going to preserve that is through fiscal spending properly, so that you can see your hard-earned taxpayer money is being spent on things you feel are effective. Minnesota is the 4th highest taxed state in the nation. I don't think that's good. The taxes are high enough. It's what we do with the revenue coming in that's going to be setting the tone for the future. So I am a believer in fiscal responsibility. I do not believe government is the answer to every problem. And so if you share these views and you look for these, I would appreciate your support come November. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your participating in the forum and for running for office. It's an important part of our democratic process. We appreciate that. And thank you to the League of Women Voters Edina, Jewish Community Action, and the National Council of Jewish Women, the Minneapolis chapter, for sponsoring this forum. The forum has been taped for broadcast on Edina Community Channel 16, and the rebroadcast schedule has been distributed to the live audience and is available on Channel 16's website. The forum will also be available for viewing on the League of Women Voters Edina's website, lwvedina.org, and it will be on the City of Edina's website, edinamn.gov, and on YouTube. Remember to vote on Tuesday, November 8th, and thank you all for attending and for watching on TV. Good evening.